In the very first negotiation program I ever did as a participant, the trainer, a woman called Sandra Proctor, introduced us to a really interesting idea. She introduced us this idea that whatever you're doing, however you're negotiating, understanding the personality of who you're negotiating with is critical. She introduced us to a very simple model that suggested that there were different types of negotiators. And she said that if you understand what types of negotiators there are, and if you also understand your own personality, you will understand how you can adapt to be more effective as a negotiator. And I remember it really kind of rang a bell with me, because at that time I had a difficult negotiation going on with someone who was far more what we'll call down to earth, but far more detail focused than me. They had far more what we'll call blue energy. And my yellow energy, which is much more kind of outgoing and more kind of inspiration driven, a big picture, was clashing with their energy. And so negotiating them was proving to be really difficult. Now, as soon as I realised that I think she called them a conscientious negotiator, and they called me an inspired negotiator. As soon as I realised that difference, I was able to connect more effectively. Now, this idea of personality is clearly, it's not Sandra Proctor's and it's not mine. For thousands of years, humans have been interested in how are people different. And this science of personalities come a long way. The important thing is, if you go back to Darwin, when I was at school, I was taught, and it's interesting, I've been training around the world in this, and I was taught in school that Darwin's theory of evolution was summed up pretty effectively as survival of the fittest. Well, actually, it's fascinating. If you look at this quote, it kind of blew me away when I found it, because actually what Darwin said is, it's not the fittest, it's not the strongest that will survive, but it's the ones most adaptable to change. And so when you get to understand what kind of traits, what kind of personality traits have you adopted, and what kind of personality traits have the people you're negotiating with adopted, you're able to adapt more effectively. And so, for thousands of years, as I say, starting with Hippocrates, who I'll talk about in a little while, but then moving on in the last century, Carl Jung started perfecting or articulating effectively the idea that we're different. And he introduced really the idea of personality types to modern psychology. Now, today, many of the personality programs that are used even in business are slightly discredited by the fact that they focus on typing, because modern psychology talks about trait as opposed to type. So I'm going to try and use that theory to help you understand negotiation personalities. That theory, the idea that there are 5 aspects of personality that called the big 5 in psychology. Those aspects impact the way that we relate, impact the way, in this case, that we negotiate. Now, there's a law in cybernetics, which I really like. It's called the Law of Requisite Variety. And if you've ever seen the show Robot Wars, it's a perfect representation of it. So, Robot Wars, it's that game that they have it in Britain, we have it, where grown men and sometimes their sons battle each other with robots. And what generally happens is there's one kind of robot with a certain tool that's very dominant, and it might be smashing all the other robots, until a robot comes in with some different tools that it can't deal with. And it kind of ideally sums up this idea, the law of requisite variety, which is simply that in any system, human or machine, the individual with the widest range of responses is likely to control the system. And that's why we're talking about personality today. That's why it's an integral part of any training that you need to do in getting results working with other people. So if you can understand your personality, you can understand the person that you're negotiating with, then you can understand how can you adapt and connect most effectively. How can you influence them most effectively? So I'm really looking forward to showing you how this art of personality can be used in all of your negotiations, in all of your interactions, to get better results.